y'all, it's Rocio. I'm doing my daily life Bible reading. Today we're starting on chapter 25 of the book of Leviticus on verse 29. And yesterday I got really excited at the end because I was getting to parts that I like, and I remember reading this and being like, this stuff was really interesting. And so I'm just going to continue from there. What I wanted to say from yesterday is that it's just very different because the way we think about the world today, right? If you were in such a bad position where you had to sell your family land just to make it, there's no way that just because we hit a certain year or a certain mark, that land would come back to you because of any reason, right? Like that's just not how the world works today. And so I just think it was really cool that that was something that was considered at this time, where people had the ability to do that. And so I just think that I like those parts. In my head, I think of like showing the character of God and how He cared about people, and all of these rules, for the most part, were for that purpose. You know, there's purposes to everything that's in here. Some parts are really hard to understand, and some parts are just really hard to accept because we don't live in that kind of world anymore. But there are parts that you look back and you're like, oh, that would be so cool. Okay, let me just start reading. If a man sells a residence in a walled city, his right of redemption will last until a year has passed after its sale. His right of redemption will last a year. If it is not redeemed by the end of the full year, then the house on the walled city is permanently transferred to its purchaser throughout his generation. It is not to be released on the Jubilee. But houses in villages that have no walls around them are to be classified as open fields. The right to redeem such houses stays in effect, and they are to be released at the Jubilee. Concerning the Levitical cities, the Levites always have the right to redeem houses in the cities they possess. Whatever property one of the Levites can redeem, a household in a city they possess must be released at the Jubilee, because the houses in the Levitical cities are their possession among the Israelites. The open pasture land around their cities may not be sold, for it is their permanent possession. If your brother becomes destitute and cannot sustain himself among you, you are to support him as a foreigner or temporary resident, so that he can continue to live among you. Do not profit or take interest from him, but fear your God and let your brother live among you. You are not to lend him your silver with interest or sell him your food for profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. So those parts are really cool, and obviously we don't do that in today's world. I think even within the very religious sects, people still charge interest, right? Or they want to make a profit out of the things that you do for others. And so to even think about that is very hard, because we don't live in a world where that's considered like a positive or smart thing to do. And so just think it's in here. I feel like nobody talks about the fact that it says that in here. I just think of all the things to take from this book that could be, people just focus on the really negative stuff, and we don't focus on some of the stuff that hey, don't charge me any interest. So, yeah. Okay. 39. If your brother among you becomes destitute and sells himself to you, you must not force him to do slave labor. Let him stay with you as a hired hand or temporary resident. He may work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then he and his children are to be released from you, and he may return to his clan and his ancestral property. They are not to be sold as slaves, because they are my slaves that I brought out of the land of Egypt. You are not to rule over them harshly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to be from the nations around you. You may purchase male and female slaves. You may also purchase from the foreigners staying with you, or from the families living among you, those born in your land. They may become your property. You may leave them to your sons after you inherit as property. You can make them slaves for life. But concerning your brothers, the Israelites, you must not rule over one another harshly. And then it goes back into the difficult stuffs. So I think I've talked about the slave part before. The term, even in this little reading right here, was used in two different ways. So consider the definitions of how it's being used in the reading. Also, consider that it was a practice, and it was something that was contextually within the world. And so this was putting rules on it was like putting limitations on what was already taking place, so that people weren't treating people in a way that they shouldn't be treating them. But again, that doesn't mean that makes it okay for today's world. This was very specific context for specific people, a specific time, a specific place, for a specific reason, not for the sake of all of us now saying, oh, that's okay, and definitely not for the context of any history in the U.S. or any time frame, like any current discussion or ideology. That's definitely not what it's concerning, so don't even try to use it that way. Okay. Whew. Let me continue. 47. If a foreigner or temporary resident living among you prospers, but your brother living near him becomes destitute and sells himself to the foreigner living among you, or to a member of the foreigner's clan, he has the right of redemption after he has been sold. One of his brothers may redeem him. His uncle or cousin may redeem him, or any of his close relatives from his clan may redeem him. If he prospers, he may redeem himself. The one who purchased him is to calculate the time from the year he sold himself to the year of Jubilee. The price of his sale will be determined by the number of years. It will be set for him like the daily wages of a hired hand. If many years are still left, he must pay his redemption price in proportion to them based on his purchase price. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, he will calculate and pay the price of his redemption in proportion to his remaining years. He will stay with him like a man hired year by year. A foreign owner is not to rule over him harshly in your sight. If he is not redeemed in any of these ways, he and his children are to be released at the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites are my slaves. They are my slaves that I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Whew. Okay, that's all of chapter 25. So, I guess there's a few things to bring up there. Again, as I said in 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Some very difficult stuff here. Especially when we, in today's context, slaves, not okay. Talking about prostitutes, not cool. Talking about cleanliness and purity, and I mean, to a lot of people, probably even reading about some of these more different rules that don't fit in today's world is kind of hard to read. And I think sometimes, depending on what you already value or what you already see as normal or abnormal in the world, you go back and you read these, and some parts are like, oh, that would seem really cool. Some parts are like, how in the world, like, that's not okay. And then we put our values or our ideas or opinions on them or on God based on what we're reading, because we're like, how could a God be good and allow slavery, right? Especially because we have a very different context of that word within our own history. And there are people who have a much stronger connection to those words, either in a positive or in a negative. Not that it's ever positive, but like some people are like, yeah, let's not go into that. But some people may have an affinity towards some negative things in the world today, and use parts of the Bible to then try to say, see, that's allowed, it's a good thing, or it was justified. And historically, that's what happened. When we talk about, like, historically the United States and slavery, you hear accounts of that time frame, knowing that they literally taught certain things of the Bible. Pay attention to how they only taught some parts, and tried to use the Bible to justify those really bad actions. And then I guess one thing to consider is that even in that time frame, there were people who did read the Bible properly, who did fight against those things, who were able to see that that wasn't the context that they should be used in. And so keep that in consideration even today when we're reading these really weird, really hard parts that, again, they were for a specific people at a specific time, a specific place, for a specific context, specific purpose. We don't understand and won't understand everything. It's here for us to understand what did happen. A lot of this is just historical, right? We get to read it. Some of it is symbolic in the sense of, like, the reason that it matters today is because it connects to something that matters later on and to the entirety of the story. And not everything is something that is like you should do or support or like or even align yourself with. Okay, so keep that into consideration. And if you're struggling with it, that's something to consider. One, learning more about and understanding more, because there's got to be that intellectual side of it where you have to first and foremost just even understand what's being said. Like in the end, when he says, you are my slaves, the term he's using right there is not the same as the way we think of slavery, and it's not the same as the way it's used over here when it's talking about how they became hired hands, and it's not the same as the way that slavery works in the real world. So you got to understand intellectually the actual definitions of the word, but then you also have to go through your own process of understanding how this even relates to what you're thinking, what you're believing, how you're aligning yourself in the world, and what God's leading you to, and what he wants you to understand, or what you need to, do you know what I mean? Like, you have to have that personal relationship with God as well. So take both those things into consideration. And yeah, 26 and 27 coming tomorrow or the next day. So, yeah, thank you for being here with me and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Peace out.